Composers can't be taught. I've heard this throughout my entire life. There seems to be this desire to keep music sacred, and we want to believe it's completely an innate ability. Music does have the power to move us in such profound ways, and I think many people want to believe that there is something special about the people who create masterpieces. It's true that some people are born with a greater talent and ability to compose music. Mozart is a great example. He composed his first piece when he was younger than 6 years old. So it would seem, based on this, that masters are born with this talent. But we have to realize Mozart was trained by his father Leopold, an extremely talented composer in his own right. And he watched on as his older brothers and sisters were also trained. If you listen to Mozart's earliest piece, there is a certain aspect of his style that remains throughout his life and compositions. However, the sophistication of his methods and his ability to convey his musical thoughts improve. As he trains, as he gets better, as he gets more experience, his music does improve. Mozart certainly had talent and was likely born with the right disposition to pick up on music and compose at a high level. But, and this is extremely important, he was still taught. I believe that great composers can be born or made, but they must all be taught at some point. Beyond Mozart's unbelievable talent, he also had something else that I believe made him really great. He was relentless, and he would practice musical skills until they were perfected. One famous story is how he meticulously played thirds up and down the piano. He relished in their sound. He enjoyed doing that. It was something that brought him pleasure. When I look for new composition students, I'm not only looking for the most compositionally talented composers. I also realize students who work hard can overcome a lack of early musical training. So what I want to do now is listen to one of Mozart's first published works. We're going to listen to that in just a second. You may notice how the composition exhibits many of his characteristic features, but it does lack the sophistication of his later works. So we know that Mozart started to learn to compose music at age 3. And he also played the piano, clarinet, and violin. Now, when you listen to this piece, I want you to kind of pay attention to the form of the piece. How we have this initial basic idea in the beginning, the first 2 bars. That idea keeps coming back, but he changes it in the trio section where we get into this C major area halfway through the piece. And he thickens the texture. He does things to the composition to provide contrast. It's this initial basic idea followed by contrast that really helps build tension in a musical work. And Mozart does it extremely well. Let's go ahead and look at this piece in a little more detail. So notice how in the first half of the piece, from here, the beginning, up to about measure 18, Mozart maintains a similar structure. He uses the same motives, right here, in a sequential sentence structure. So here we start on G, then we go down to F sharp. The B is moving down to A, and the interval relationships are kept the same. This is an exact sentence structure. It's a type of phrase that you learn about in form and analysis. So essentially what this means is there's a basic idea here in measures 1 to 2, and then a sequenced repeat of that idea in measure 3 and 4. And there's different types of sentence structures. There's an exact, sequential, statement response. We don't need to worry about that. This one's sequential though. What happens here is there's this need to continue on to the second half of the phrase. From here, Mozart does something very typical of sentence structure. he fragments the eighth note idea and ends with an increase of harmonic movement. So if we look at this, this is half of the basic idea. The basic idea's first two measures, including the pickup, it equals out to 2 full measures. This is half of that initial idea, approximately. So what Mozart does is he takes that, he breaks it off, he turns it into a fragment, and then he continues it, brings about a cadence, ends the phrase. If we go to the trio section here, starting with a key change to C major, Mozart thickens the harmony. See how the bass becomes thicker. It also becomes lower. The texture expands. And notice the melody line. It's not as high as the initial melody line. So Mozart is doing everything he can while still maintaining the spirit of the initial basic idea to enhance and develop this piece and create contrast. He's doing it through thickened harmony. He's doing it by changing the pitch register. He's doing as many things as he can to kind of bring this about. So if we look at this, this is still a sentence structure. Here's this basic idea here. Here's a repeat of the basic idea. But notice the harmony. It's a little bit different. He starts to change it. Whereas the first time we see a sentence structure, he keeps it the same. So since we're in the trio section, this is kind of the middle section here, we are creating a little bit of instability. So Mozart uses a looser version of the more precise sentence structure. He then eventually brings back the initial idea, the basic idea from the beginning. It's right here, fragmented a little bit and modified. And then eventually this Menuetto da capo tells you to go back to the beginning and play till the end. So this offers a recapitulation of the main material. So all of this is extremely interesting from a theoretical standpoint. But from a composing standpoint, something very strategic is happening. Mozart is building familiarity through a simple repetition of ideas in the beginning. He then helps to instill the sound of that basic idea in the first 2 measures further by fragmenting the idea and repeating it. Lots of fragmentation here as well. Now, if Mozart decided to put a cadence between measure 3 and 4, like you might expect in a more common period structure, this piece would feel stunted. Mozart correctly keeps the piece moving forward by avoiding a cadence and creating tension through fragmentation of the basic idea. Another thing is there's no cadence here between this idea and this idea. So that creates a sense that this is all part of one phrase because the cadence is held to the end. The other thing is with sentence structure where you repeat the basic idea, it's different from a period structure. In a period structure, you'd have the basic idea and then something different here. It'd be a contrasting idea. Sentence structure keeps the same idea. So because of that, we want to make sure there's absolutely no cadence between this basic idea and the contrasting idea. We also want to make sure there's no cadence here. Otherwise, we feel like a start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. It feels just a little bit stunted. So Mozart is able to keep this piece moving forward. Contrast is one of those things that composers have trouble accomplishing in their music. Contrast helps to further highlight your basic ideas and create interest. A composer can study all the theory in the world, but knowing how to balance contrasting ideas, harmonic changes, and developing an idea in an effective way is where many composers fail. But with a simple basic idea, Mozart is able to effectively create an entire cohesive piece that is also comprehensible to the audience. So coherence deals with logic, patterns. There's a basic idea that repeats. Comprehensibility deals more with form, how you present the idea. Can the listener understand it? If you want to learn more about coherence and comprehensibility, check out my Elements in Music Composition book. I go into a lot of detail with that. So I've discovered that composers often think that more theory, counterpoint, ear training, form, or just time is what they need to get to the next level. All this training is outstanding, it's great, but if you don't know how to apply these concepts to your music, no amount of training will give you the skills that you desire. This is a really important point. While I'm a composer, I also consider myself a teacher, and that's what I consider myself first. When I was younger, I pored through existing books on music composition. I was fascinated with the subject. I came across lessons created by Mozart for his students, read countless letters about the process of composition. I also learned the standard composition methods developed by composers. I studied all the main ones: Schillinger method, Schoenberg, Hindemith, Persichetti, and many other great composers wrote texts on music or about music. But I never found the technique or answers I was looking for. Schoenberg would even talk about the secret method to composing music that only the initiated knew. And for a long time, I didn't know what that was, but now I do understand it. So in graduate school, I started writing my first book, The Elements of Music Composition. This is a book that introduced a flexible composition method that helped composers see greater connections in music. I wanted eventually to create a program that would benefit others, something that actually worked. That's my big thing, is I really go slow, I really go incrementally, and I create programs that don't miss any steps as much as possible without being overly tedious. That's a hard thing to do. So this work that I did actually spurred on the creation of my music composition technique builder, which is another book you can check out. But this was an early attempt to help composers develop critical skills for music composition. Most recently, I served as a professor of music in a university for almost a decade. So my university teaching, it ranged from the undergraduate to graduate level, and it taught me something important. More knowledge of music theory or obtaining a good ear does not substantially improve a composer's ability unless the composer also learns the craft of music composition. You really need both. So I learned that theory was not a panacea. It's not going to solve all your problems, but I also discovered how to help composers write better music by combining music theory concepts, orchestration, counterpoint, audiation, all these different skills into a more integrated approach to composing music. This was something that Schoenberg wanted to do towards the end of his life. He was trying to create a unified theory of music composition because even he was aware that music theory, orchestration, counterpoint, all these subjects, they're taught in isolation. And then composers are just expected to be able to put it all together and understand how they relate. And so he tried to create a method that combined them all. He never finished it. I studied that method intensely. It's in German and partly translated into English, but there's a lot of information in there. And I think one of the reasons he couldn't finish it is because of the approach he tried to take. He tried to do everything at once. I believe you still teach these subjects separately, but you explain along the way, this is how they relate to each other. And you teach audiation first, you teach counterpoint, then you can teach music theory if students don't have that, then form an analysis, and then you can get into more advanced concepts. And as you add these other subjects, you relate them to the previous subjects. This is not something that's done. Counterpoint is taught as counterpoint. Theory is taught as theory. It's just, it's not done. Form an analysis is taught as form an analysis. So my approach is different. It's more holistic, but it's still integrated. You still learn these subjects separately while learning the connections. When I was teaching at the university, it was extremely fulfilling. There were timelines and strict curriculum and protocols that had to be followed. There was a certain amount of leeway in how I taught each class, and I could read the room pretty well and respond to students' needs. But we were all on the same train, and for better or worse, we had to arrive at the same destination exactly on time. And the students that didn't catch the train or got off at an earlier stop, they never made it to the end. So this regimented instruction protocol, it worked well for certain kinds of courses where the goals were set in stone. What I discovered is that group instruction can be really effective, but there are certain skills that students really need to learn individually. As a professor, like all professors, I maintained office hours that allowed students to come in privately and ask their questions. I valued office hour time because it gave me a chance to work with students who showed up an additional path to walk so they could hone their skills and work on their weaknesses, something I couldn't always do in the classroom. So I taught for close to a decade, and I loved working with other faculty and students. I'm now able to bring that knowledge to my own studio, and I am enjoying helping other composers solve problems and become more effective musicians. That's really what I'm all about. Really, you can think of it this way. I help composers build a bridge between where they are currently and where they want to be, which is honestly the part of composition that can't really be taught easily in a book. You can't simply say this is a method that will apply to everyone. You have to apply this individually to students on a case-by-case basis. So one of the ways I build a bridge for my students, I created a platform and a series of courses that help students to write music more effectively. So there's two aspects to lessons. There's your private lessons where you come in and we work individually on your composition because that is an individual thing. And then there are group masterclass type sessions where it's kind of like a train that's constantly going. It doesn't really have a destination. It just is constantly going. And people can come on and get off at various stops. And they can come to each session and learn something. It doesn't have to be that you get on at the first stop and you keep going till the end. You can get on and off as you need. So these master classes are designed to answer broader questions and deal with individual topics and to ask questions that would benefit the entire group of composition students. So I created a lot of these courses. One of them was the Flawless course to help my students to develop a powerful ear and have a greater ability to listen to their own music in detail. This is a course you have available publicly on YouTube. And you can just go through it and see for yourself if it works or not. I think you'll find it does. Most people do. But if you don't, then maybe you know that the other courses I offer might not be in your style, might not work for you. I also teach Audiation to help composers listen to music and compose actively in their mind before they even touch a piano or notation program. Now this is important. If you play the piano and you improvise on the piano, improvisation is a great compositional tool. If you play on the guitar, whatever instrument you play on, it's a great improvisational tool. The problem is that you are using muscle memory. You're using patterns that are familiar to you. Your hand will naturally go in certain ways. You'll play certain chords that are comfortable for you. You won't get truly creative. The only way to get truly creative is to just sit there, close your eyes, and mentally play through your compositions. And then you have to take them apart. And so this is what I help composers learn. I also teach counterpoint to help composers begin to hear and write melodies. They're supported with harmony through multiple interior melodic lines. So if you have a single melody, that's just a melody. If you write a second melody that works with that first melody, you've now created harmony. Now you add a third melody. You've created even thicker harmony. So this creates this harmonic support, and each part in your composition becomes interesting to listen to. I also created a format analysis course to help students understand how to create the best container to hold their musical ideas. If you don't have a container for your ideas, it's going to meander. It's going to sound like it doesn't have a goal. It's going to sound like there's too many ideas. People are going to get lost in your music. You need a basic structure. So I teach format analysis as a way to show how other composers did it, so then they have a greater understanding, my students, they have a greater understanding of how to actually create these structures on their own and to create original structures. So all these programs are available through my composition lesson program. They don't cost extra when you take my composition lessons, but you can also buy them piecemeal as a self-study course. When you take it as self-study, all the assignments, everything, you're on your own, but you can, of course, always ask me for support, and they cost a lot less than what they would cost if you had to take them with group support. So I will say that as an option. You can come in with my composers, but you'll have to talk to me if you want to take the group lessons. So basically what I do here is I work with composers to build technical skill, formulate a personal plan of action, and fill in the gaps in their technique and education. My courses offer a very individualized approach when you take them through my lessons, but I believe that personalized instruction combined with group master classes is the best way to help students succeed. So on my application for composition lessons, I have students articulate what it is they want to get out of lessons. It's also important that composers who study with me are willing to make a commitment and investment in themselves. After an initial evaluation period, We will begin to set goals to help you build your bridge that you need to compose more effectively. I'm available to help you achieve your goals if we both feel you're a right fit for my studio. I have to be selective though, since I can only take a small number of committed students, but I do encourage any serious students to apply. Don't worry if you feel like, well, I haven't written my first piece yet. I care less about that. I care more about whether or not you're committed to learning and developing. That's really my primary concern. And if you joined and were accepted, you would be joining a group of composers who are committed to finding their space in a world which I truly believe is full of potential. If you would like to take composition lessons, or you want to take one of the courses I'm offering as a self-study option, then you can click the link in the description to apply. Or for the self-study courses, just go over to UreMusic.com, click the courses link, and you can see what's currently available. The self-study option, it can be a good way to vet lessons and see if I'm a good fit for your personal learning style. And remember, if you do take self-study, you can always add on group support later. You just have to talk to me, and we have to make sure that the group support sessions will actually help you. So as always, if you have any questions, please post a comment or get in touch with me today. One of the things I'm going to be doing for my composers is on my UreMusic.com website, I'm going to create individual profile pages for them. So I'm only really doing this with new composers, but if you are a past composer who studied with me and you'd like to have a page created for you, just contact me and we can talk about whether or not that's an option. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'm looking forward to adding to my studio and including some really dedicated, hardworking students. Thank you.